Science is easy compared to education. Rocket science is predictable, it's causal. You pour a little physics in, you do some chemistry, a little astronomy, bam, we go to the moon, whatever. Just like our classes, right? We pour a little of this, that, bam, everybody produces and succeeds at the highest level. Well, no, because human beings are very complex, and really what we're about, information and education, is very complex. So anybody that was to say, well, if we just do this, everything's going to be great, no, and that I think will be maybe a common theme across all of our presentations here. We know that we've moved from an agricultural society to an industrial society, and then finally to an information society. And today is the information world, and if we think about things today, and that's where I'd like to start, in 2010, I said this at NC State, I'm from Seattle. Now, you're not allowed to give a speech if you're from Seattle without mentioning Chairman Bill at least once. I will do it twice, so if next time you see Bill, you can tell him Mike was on script. But I think, and I heard Bill make this comment actually probably over 20 years ago now, and it's come to pass, but I like to use it because he said computers today, in 2012, are 1,000,000 times more powerful than they were 20 years ago in 1992. And we think about that. Well, what are they? What has happened? And this is going back about 30 years, but still, if you look at it, everything from the PC to the internet to the web. So if we were looking back 50 years ago in 1972 to today, could we really have predicted what we really have in terms of the web and the connectivity and all those kinds of things? And I would think not. I talk about my students today as the Google generation, and we could say that those born 20 years ago have never known a world without the World Wide Web. I mean, just think about that, and how extraordinary that is, and how their world view and world frame are really different than ours. And the biggest change from an information perspective is from scarcity to abundance. It's, you know, I remember when I was starting out and I got my library degree in 72, 73, that, you know, there were no laptops. And if I needed an online search done, I'd have to go make an appointment with a librarian who would do a pre-search interview and then tell me to come back in 2 days. And then they would go off. I mean, just think about where we are today. And so one of the challenges for us is how do we deal with an abundant world and not a scarce world? So let's think now from 2052 for a minute. All right, I want you to move 40 years in the future. So let's talk about Bill, because what Bill had said in that speech was not just what computers are 1,000,000 times more powerful than they were 20 years ago, but it's going to happen again. And this is twice, so it's going to be a 1,000,000 times 1,000,000. And, I mean, just think about the power that we're talking about. So what I think is we'll be living in this parallel information universe. The entire environment will be intelligent. Every object will be addressable. You'll walk in here and you'll sit down and the chair will recognize you. I said this at NC State. I have patented this, called the butt print. When you sit down, the chair recognizes it. It has to adapt as we change physically and things like that. But anywhere, anytime, in any form, I don't think there's any question. But, and the walls will be intelligent. This quaint thing that we're doing now. I mean, I won't need a microphone. It'll be just projecting from my thing. And then if we think about the, and I kept trying to come up with cute names. I talk about the cyborg generation or whatever. I don't know what they'll be called. But in 2032, they may never have known a world without brain-controlled, intelligent environments. So, because if you remember, in 2024, Google sold its 50th millionth Google glasses. In 21, 28, digital paper finally outsold cellulose paper. And by digital paper, I mean it looks and feels like regular paper, but it is digital, right? The beta release of ThinkITs, and I give Roger credit for that company we created yesterday. The brain-controlled interface, right? The recently merged Google MS company has released UIE2, which is the Ubiquitous Intelligent Environment version 2. And then, of course, Sanjay invented the universal translator so that languages are moot and whatever. I mean, these are just some of the things that our students today in 2052 may have to deal with if we think about it. And so that, you know, I realize Gary gave us the 2050 kind of framework, so at least we were looking beyond next year, right? and thinking about it that way. So what would that mean for education and where we are in education? Well, education is not a million times different than it was 20 years ago. And it's not different than it was, 40 years ago or 80 years ago. It's pretty much the same factory model. We bring the widgets in, we process them out, and they're really excited in our classes and things like that, right? And even when they have technology, it's like this. And I know a lot of faculty are intimidated by it because there's the lids and all that and the barrier and everything. And I kind of see that here a little, although not too bad. And this is pretty intimidating. And also, again, 2052, trust me, they're not going to be sitting with those machines like that. The education system is pretty much a factory. We have a mass assembly line, and whether it's, your early cars to today's Prius, it's still an assembly line. But that's the big change that I see coming. The big change is the individualization, the customization of education. In special education, students have IEPs, right? They have independent or individual education plans. And why my dream is an IEP for every student. And I think we can do that. And, 25 years ago, Porsche had the first customized department in a factory so that every Porsche could be slightly different, and I think that's what we want for education. And we certainly want it for this young lady who is my granddaughter. And, my heart goes out to her. I don't want her in a factory school. I want her to be treated like the person that she deserves. And what's great is we in the information field can really help that. And when it comes to information and education, and I've talked about this, I'm calling it these days information alchemy. And that is the move from data to information to knowledge and to wisdom. And what we might think is data is the raw stuff and just getting it into the systems, and then information is data that makes sense, it's labeled and somehow. And then that really special change where you take information, you juxtapose it, you process it, you think about it, and it becomes knowledge. And that's just magical, that move. And that, to me, is what education is a lot about. It's about this from information to knowledge. And if you think about that information to knowledge, information is power kind of, but really knowledge is power. That ability to think big thoughts and to make decisions and things. And that aha moment. Think about your last aha moment. Maybe it just happened when I was speaking or something. I don't know. I would hope. And you almost get tingly when that happens, when you reach that realization. And you can almost taste that movement from information to knowledge. And that's what we want, and that's what education needs to foster and encourage. And what it has, I think what will happen is we can separate out the ends of education from the means of education. Right now at universities, we are both responsible for the end. We grant degrees and we give certificates and those things, but also the means, which is primarily the classroom and the lecture and those things. And I think in the future, these are going to be separated. And the role of the academy may be very much in helping to define the ends, however it might be. And I spent an hour last night online finding all these, really interesting photos that would somehow encourage us that we have the ends. But then when we think about the means, there's lots of different ways to get there. And the one I love is the one in the middle, which is the cart before the horse. Well, maybe that's appropriate sometimes. Maybe we should have some carts before horses. And the means will be varied and change and online and whatever. And the role of the academy will be to guide learners through that after we have defined those ends, right? And it comes down to what I'm calling the personal education record, like the personal health record. And Bill's going to talk in a minute about, and one of the things he talked about was the education positioning system. I think we're talking the same thing. We're in sync. And it's, again, a million times a million times more powerful. So what that's going to look like, that virtual, that education record that captures everything about the learner, whether they are taking a walk in the botanical garden or spending time at the Pacific Science Center or hanging out with their grandfather or in a classroom.